Hello, my name is Peter Raymer, and today we're going to be looking at how to write an edit method in Microsoft Dynamics 365 for finance and operations. Last time we looked at display methods, which allow you to run code on a form control to control what is displayed back to the user. Today, when we look at edit methods, they're very similar, but they allow us to run code on the value that's entered into the form control, as well as run code on what displays back to the user. So they're really useful in a lot of different scenarios, but there's also some limitations and some cautions with using an edit method. So let's get started and let's take a look. Let's look at what pieces make up an edit method and some differences versus a display method. I recorded a previous video on display methods. I recommend you watch that first, as edit methods are really just display methods with some extra features. All right, here's one example of an edit method that we find on Venn table. The first thing we need to do to define an edit method is use this edit keyword. When we worked on display methods, we used a display keyword. For edit methods, we use this edit keyword. This tells the system that this is an edit method. The other couple things that really make up an edit method are that the first parameter is a Boolean. By best practice, we always we name it set. Oftentimes it's underscore set. In this case, Microsoft's code just has the word set. Then secondly, we have a parameter which contains a variable, and that variable will be set by the system to whatever value the user types into the form control. So again, we hook up edit methods to form controls, and then the system will automatically set our set value and our second parameter as well. It a little bit depends on whether you have, it depends where you add this edit method as to whether you'll have 2 parameters or 3. If you add this edit method to a form data source, then you're going to have 3 parameters: a set, data source table buffer, and a third parameter which contains the value the user typed in. If you add this edit method to a table, which is the case here, then you're just going to have 2 parameters, the set and another parameter containing the value that the user typed in. In this case, we're passing in a reason code, which is of type string, but this could be an integer, an enum, many other types as well. So the key thing is you just want to make sure that this parameter is the same type as your form control. Okay. Let's look at some other components of the edit method. The edit method's always kind of broken down into 2 sections. There's this if statement that says if set is set to true, meaning the system is calling this method because a user actively typed in a value and then tabbed out of this field. If that's the case, the system will call this method. It will set to true and pass in the value. So in this case, if set is set to true, we're going to use the this.accountNum. So remember, this refers to the currently selected record. We're going to use the accountNum on that currently selected record to find a related record. In this case, the related record is on Vend on hold history table. Then we're going to update the reason code field on that related record with the value that the user entered in. So the user is entering in a field or a value into this form control, which is a reason code. That value is going to get set on a related record, and that related record is going to get updated. Then we're going to come down to this return statement where we are going to return back to the user what value we want to show. So in this case, we're going to echo back the exact same value that they typed in to the user, but we could have run code, as you can see in this else statement, where we look up the reason code and set it and return the value back. And this line of code is going to run in all other scenarios where the set value is not set. So essentially this line of code makes it act like a display method. So really an edit method is one part that's underneath an if set condition, and then the rest of the code really runs in the scenario where the user isn't setting the value. So that's kind of your basic display method. Let's talk about some of the use cases that edit methods are used for. I've kind of looked at a bunch of different edit methods, and I've kind of categorized them into 3 different use cases. There's certainly many more, and these are not the only ones, but I share these use cases in case that helps you understand, should I be using an edit method in my particular scenario or should I not? So in this case, this edit method is updating a value on a related record, a record that we don't have a data source for on the Venn table form. A user or developer could add the Venn on hold history table as a data source on the Venn table form, join it into the other data sources, and get basically this similar functionality just by joining in that data source. Sometimes that's not what a developer decides to do. Sometimes there's performance improvements of not adding the data source directly to the form. So we can update this related record by using an edit method. And so that's one very common scenario that I've seen edit methods being used, is when you need to update a related record. A second use case is when you need to modify what is displayed out to the user. And so let's take a look at that. On MCR sales line, there is a method edit masked gift card ID. And what this method does is it takes the gift card that you have entered in, it stores it as is, whatever you've entered, directly to the gift card number field on the table. So it's stored fully correctly as whatever you type in. But when it comes to displaying a value back to the user, it is actually going to mask that gift card number. So it's going to show star, 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 and then the last couple digits of the value that you typed in. The reason why it does this is so that someone's not viewing all the raw gift card numbers, maybe taking a screenshot and using those gift card numbers illegally. So it allows a user to add new gift cards, but then immediately those full gift card numbers are no longer displayed to the screen. This is kind of for security reasons. There's a few different ways this could have been done, but masking the gift card is one example that a edit method is really useful for. Maybe you want to change how a value's formatted back to the user. You want to concatenate a first name and a last name together, as we looked at in our display method. That's another use for an edit method. The power of the edit method, though, is it allows that formatting to be done as the user's entering in that value, and not just displaying a value back out. So that's kind of a second use case. The third use case that I've seen is when we want to validate a field on a table. So let me scroll up here, see if we can find another one here. So in the same table, MCR sales line, there is the method edit gift card ID. This allows us to perform some validation on this gift card before we save it and return it back to the user. So that can be really useful. The next topic that I want to talk about is where to put edit methods. Similar, very similar to display methods. Edit methods can be added on a form data source as well as a form method and a table method. They cannot be added to report methods. But with edit methods, we want to, as a best practice, often add them to a table method. This allows our edit method that we've written as a developer to be used by other developers on other forms. Any form that has a data source that has the underlying table of where we put our edit method can use that edit method. Whereas if we just add the edit method to a form data source method, only that form can use that edit method. Okay, one of the other cool things that we can do is we can cache an edit method, and we can do that in a couple different ways. We can override the init method on a form. So in this case, the sales table form init method has been overridden, and then you can add a line that looks like this, where you say the data source with _ds dot cache add method, and you specify table method string, the name of the table, and the name of the method. That's one way to cache a method, but now there's kind of a newer, even easier way to cache a method. We can add this attribute at the top of our edit or display method. We can say square bracket sys client cache data method attribute parentheses true close parentheses a closed square bracket. So anything inside of a square bracket like that is called an attribute. We can add this attribute right above the definition of our edit method, and then the system will cache this method. This allows the method to run much faster than it would otherwise. And that kind of leads me to one of the limitations of edit methods. Edit methods won't allow you to use the filter controls on a grid like you would with a regular data field. So keep that in mind. And if we've got a lot of intensive logic happening in our edit methods, it's really going to slow things down. So we need to keep that in mind and maybe not use an edit method if we're doing a lot of coding and functionality within here. All right, let's look at after we create an edit method, how do we hook it up? And for that, I'm actually going to switch to an example. So I have a form called RSM vehicle, and on RSM vehicle, it shows different vehicles. I've used this in a few past examples. Well, in my scenario, let's say you want to add a phone number where someone can enter in their phone number for their particular vehicle that we're keeping track of. Maybe we're, a mechanic and we work on different vehicle IDs and we want to keep track of the primary phone number. But let's say we want to display the phone number in a really easy to read format with parentheses and dashes, but we want to store the phone number in a value that doesn't have parentheses and dashes. That way it's consistent, it's easier to index, all those pieces. So we can use an edit method for that. So that's what I've added right here. So as a quick demonstration of how this works, I could type in 123 555 and then 444. So that's a phone number. And then when I tab out of it, my edit method is going to run. It's going to format my number and display a formatted version with the parentheses and dashes. So that's pretty cool, and that's really nice. So let's look at the code and see how we did that. So on the table itself, RSM vehicle, I added a method to this table's code. So here's my table. I have a few display methods. Here's my edit method. I wrote public edit, and then I specified a return type. In this case, phone is a extended data type of type string, and then I named my method edit phone. The first parameter is called set, and then the second parameter is _phone. This is the value that when a user changes gets set to my value. Next, I've really got two parts. I've got an if set part and then a part that gets returned always when this edit method's run, and it's just displaying the value. So if the user has typed in a value, what I want to do is I want to run this method that I wrote that removes the formatting from the phone number. So if you typed in something with dashes or parentheses or anything else, I want to remove all that formatting and just keep the numbers itself and store the numbers only into my field on my underlying table. Then I want to add the formatting back to the phone number, but I want to do it consistently. I want to add the format the way I want to see it for every single phone number. So I'm going to apply that to that logic. I'm going to store it in a local variable called phone with formatting, and then I'm going to return that back to the screen. So really pretty simple edit method. I did have to do a little work to add this code, remove formatting and add formatting, so I'll explain that real quick. Remove formatting, I'm using a .NET function called regex. It's a class and the method is replace. I pass in my phone number. I pass in this pattern, which I know this is a little hard to see, but this pattern removes everything but the digits from the number and replaces everything else with a blank string. So in the end, I get a value that's just numbers. And then here in my add formatting back to phone number method, I am taking my phone number. I am first doing the same thing again, running the same replace statement to remove all but the numbers. And then once I have only the numbers, I'm going to reformat it to add back parentheses and a dash between the part of the number and the last part of the number, the last three digits. And then once I have that, I'm going to return it back. If the value is already blank, I don't want to add parentheses and dashes back, so I'm just going to return a blank string as well. So in the end, I use these two methods, but the actual edit method itself is very straightforward. I'm removing the format for storing the value in the table. I'm adding the format back for when I want to display it to the user. I added this method, this edit method to the form by dragging my edit method to a field group. You could have set it directly on a form control, and I'll show you that more directly in a minute. But it was easiest to just take this edit phone, drag it to my all field group, which I've already got set up. So that's one of the really cool things is you can add not only fields, but display methods and edit methods to field groups as well. Then I came over to my form and I right-clicked on my form and said restore. That makes the form read my field group and update the grid that I have that's using my data group called all. It then automatically added this form control for me called form grid control underscore edit phone and set the properties for me. If you're not using a data group, you can right click on your grid and just add a field like normal, add a string control, and then go ahead and set the properties. So let's look at the properties. In my case, the data source is set to my data source, which is RSM vehicle, and then the data method is set to the name of my method. The name of my method is edit phone. So that's one of the key differences with edit methods and display methods versus form controls that use data fields, is instead of setting this data field to a field on my data source, we're setting the data method property to a method that's defined either in the methods node of my form data source, or better yet, on my table methods itself right here. So yep, that's it. One more look at this edit method and we're pretty good to go. So again, some cautions: edit methods can be slow and they can perform not as well as a data field. They don't let you filter on them, so just keep that in mind. in summary, in this lesson we learned how to write an edit method, we learned how to hook up the edit method to a form control, and you learned about the different pieces of an edit method. That edit methods need a couple different parameters. They need an if set condition where we run code when that value is entered in by a user. We also need code that runs just all the time that determines what value can display back to the user. We looked at some common types of how edit methods are used. They can be used to set values on related records. They can be used to change the format of values that we display back to the user. They can also run code to help validate our input. Those are just a few common examples of how you can use edit methods, but I'm sure you'll find other uses as well. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you watching. If you liked the video, click the like button. I also invite you to push the subscribe button as well. If there's other topics you would like to see a video on, please post in the comments and I'll see what I can do. I hope you learned something new today. Thank you.